Hello, I'm Quentin Collins, Assistant Director and an alum of the Solstice MFA program. Welcome to our 2022 Writers Helping Writers Fundraiser reading featuring Jacqueline Woodson and Alan Lightman. Before we begin in earnest, I want to start with some housekeeping items. During this event, audience microphones and cameras are not active. Show your support for our readers and speakers using the chat and reactions. Also, if you make a donation during the reading, feel free to post about it in the chat. If you have technical concerns, please use the chat to direct message our Zoom admin for the event, Sam Cook. Live captioning is available. Look for the closed caption option in the taskbar at the bottom of your screen. As we open this virtual space, I would like to acknowledge that the territory on which Lasell University stands is that of the Pawtucket and the Massachusetts people. Lasell's campus is a place to honor and respect the history of the Native and Indigenous communities who continue to reside in the area currently known as Massachusetts, and the continued efforts of their community leaders to ensure that history is not oversimplified or lost. This statement is one small step in acknowledging the difficult history that brought us to reside on this land, and to help us seek understanding of our place within that history. Ownership of land itself is a colonial concept, and we acknowledge that the ideal restorative measure is to return land to Native and Indigenous communities. The Solstice MFA program of Lasell University seeks ways to be part of a better future going forward. As we grow, we pledge to seek out Native writers for our faculty and guest faculty. And meanwhile, we have established the Dubuque Fellowship for Native and Indigenous Writers, which will be granted to an incoming Solstice student annually. We hope to inspire others to take action as well. One way you might do so is to consider a gift to the Native Land Conservancy based in the area currently known as Mashpee, Massachusetts. Since the beginning, the Solstice MFA program has committed itself to nurturing the diverse voices of America and beyond through not only a compassion-focused philosophy, but also need-based scholarships to help create the more equitable paths to a graduate degree in creative writing. Through our Writers Helping Writers Scholarship Fund, we grant $1,000 awards to eligible students in the program every semester, and each year we host this fundraiser to reaffirm our commitment to the mission. This afternoon, you will hear readings from award-winning authors Alan Lightman and Jacqueline Woodson, as well as learn more about our scholarships and the students they support. I will now pass the virtual floor to our graduate, Dean Rott, a previous scholarship recipient, to share how the funding helped him achieve his goals as a writer.
Hello, my name is Dean Rott. Like Quentin had said, I'm a Solstice alum, having graduated this past January with a concentration in fiction. And also, like he said, I benefited from the Writers Helping Writers Scholarship and want to thank the staff of Solstice and those who contributed to the fund for that help. When I started the program, scholarships obviously help on a financial level. And when I started the program, I worked for a local county. My wife was working at a hardware store, and we had 2 children in college. And needless to say, that financial aid was a great help to us. But it helped in more ways than that. The scholarship helped make me feel a part of the community. It told me that I belonged, and that meant so much more even than the financial aid. It also provided motivation throughout the years. Whenever I struggled or felt overwhelmed, I'd remember the faith that had been put into me and put into my ability by that scholarship. The Writers Helping Writers Fund here was one more thing that kept me moving forward. It kept me from letting down those who had supported me from the start. I thank everybody at Solstice, the fellow students, the staff, and I thank everybody again who has contributed to this wonderful fund. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Dean. I wish your internet was working better today. We could have seen your smiling face, but we really appreciate those heartfelt words. Greetings, everyone, and thanks so much for attending the 2022 Solstice MFA Programs fundraiser for our Writers Helping Writers Scholarship Fund. I'm Meg Carney, the program's founding director, and we really appreciate your being with us here today. This afternoon, it's my great honor to introduce our 2 special guests. both world-class best-selling authors who also work for social justice. Believe it or not, my first opportunity to introduce our first brilliant guest is Jacqueline Woodson, was 27 years ago. Now, I'd like to make a joke and say that I was only 12 years old then, but no, it was 1995, and I was in my second year at the National Book Foundation, sponsor of the National Book Awards. And part of my job at that time was to start an intergenerational summer writing camp for aspiring writers who couldn't afford the type of instruction and mentorship that the camp offered. Back in 1995, when the camp was in its infancy, I had one faculty member lined up, National Book Award author Norma Fox Mazer. And I needed a second faculty member. So Norma said to me, there's a brilliant young novelist named Jacqueline Woodson that you should bring on board and get her now because she is going to be big. And oh my goodness, Norma was so right. But Norma was also right that Jacqueline was not only a brilliant writer, but also a down-to-earth, deeply good person. I've been nothing but grateful to have called her friend all these years, and that when we started the Solstice MFA program back in 2006, we were also thankful to be able to call her one of our founding consulting writers. In 2022, Jacqueline Woodson received the Hans Christian Andersen Award, the highest international recognition given to an author of children's books, to recognize lifelong achievement. She is author of myriad books for children and young adults, including the verse memoir, Brown Girl Dreaming, which won the Credit Scott King Award and the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, and the National Book Award, and was made into a 6-part television miniseries directed by, among others, Spike Lee. She's also the author of the picture book, The Other Side, which has won many awards, including the Texas Bluebonnet Award and a Child Magazine Best Book Award. It was additionally made an ALA notable book. She also adapted her National Book Award finalist middle grade novel Locomotion as a play, and the stage version premiered at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. in October 2010. At the same time, Jacqueline also writes fiction for adults. Those novels include Red at the Bone and Another Brooklyn, which was also a National Book Award finalist. But Jacqueline's cross-genre books are not just award-winning or just winning accolades. They are speaking about racism, friendship, drug addiction, sexuality, bullying, mixed race relationships, solitude, slavery, incarceration, the immigrant and the LGBTQ experience, music, love. I could go on. All topics that resonate deeply for young people and that readers of all ages need as both portals to understanding as mirrors for self-acceptance. Additional awards include Newbery Honors, Best Book lists from the American Library Association and Publishers Weekly. She has received a MacArthur Fellowship, an Astrid Lindgren Memorial Award, a Margaret A. Edwards Award for Lifetime Achievement, 2 Jane Addams Peace Awards, 3 Lambda Literary Awards, and the Kenyon Review Award for Literary Excellence. She has served as the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature for the Library of Congress from 2018 to 2019. A former drama therapist for runaways and homeless children in New York City, Jacqueline has taught fiction and young people's literature at several institutions, including the City College, City University in New York, the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, Massachusetts, and of course for the Solstice MFA program. She also underwrites our fellowship for young people's writers of African or Caribbean descent. And I believe Jackie is going to be reading to us from a train station in DC because she is going back and forth from DC and Brooklyn because she's doing another play at the Kennedy Center, this one based on The Day You Begin. So it's amazing that she can be with us today. But just one last thing, always an advocate for social justice and aspiring writers. In 2018, Jacqueline founded Baldwin for the Arts, a nurturing retreat space north of New York City for artists of the global majority to explore, create, and breathe, free from distractions and the hindrances of everyday life. And more information can be found at baldwinforthearts.org. Jackie, thank you so much for being here. And everyone, please give her a warm welcome.
Thanks so much, Meg. It's so great to be back here and to be supporting Solstice, which has been doing the work for, well, I can't believe it's even that long. And even just listening to you, Quentin, talk about the Indigenous people and the work we're doing to return land to them and to do more than just say words. I feel like this is who Solstice is. Y'all have always tried to create change through literature, through supporting writers of all colors, all economic classes and genders. So I deeply appreciate you. And that's why when Meg, my homegirl, is like, can you do this? I'm like, well, of course I can, even if it does mean coming to you from the conference room at the Union Station, at Amtrak's Union Station, before I have to get on my train back to New York City. So I wanted to start, I'm putting on a timer. I wanted to start by reading to you from just two pieces from Brown Girl Dreaming, which is a memoir about basically how I became a writer and coming of age in the 60s and 70s. And I think I like starting with Brown Girl Dreaming because it's kind of the baseline of everything I write. In writing it, it made me realize where so many of my stories were coming from. February 12th, 1963. I am born on a Tuesday at University Hospital, Columbus, Ohio, USA, a country caught between Black and white. I am born not long from the time or far from the place where my great-great-grandparents worked the deep, rich land, unfree, dawn till dusk, unpaid, drank cool water from scooped out gourds, looked up and followed the sky's mirrored constellation to freedom. I am born as the South explodes, too many people, too many years, enslaved, then emancipated, but not free. The people who look like me keep fighting and marching and getting killed so that today, February 12th, 1963, and every day from this moment on, brown children like me can grow up free, can grow up learning and voting and walking and riding wherever we want. I am born in Ohio, but the stories of South Carolina already run like rivers through my veins. And this is called It'll Be Scary Sometimes. And it's actually, I'm reading this because the play I am doing at the Kennedy Center, where I'm in residence for the next 2 years, it's a 3-year residency, is based on this poem, which inspired the book, The Day You Begin. My great-great-grandfather on my father's side was born free in Ohio, 1832, built his home and farmed his land, then dug for coal when the farming wasn't enough, fought hard in the war. His name in stone now on the Civil War Memorial. William J. Woodson, United States Colored Troops, Union, Company B, 5th Regiment. A long time dead, but living still among the other soldiers on that monument in Washington, D.C. His son was sent to Nelsonville, lived with an aunt, William Woodson, the only brown boy in an all-white school. You'll face this in your life someday, my mother will tell us over and over again, a moment when you walk into a room and no one there is like you. It'll be scary sometimes, but think of William Woodson and you'll be all right. And this last piece from Brown Girl Dreaming is, I'm sorry, it's called Tobacco. And I just like reading this because it's my favorite poem. And over this pandemic, so many of us lost so many people. And in thinking about that loss, I tend to go back to the ancestors and think about the old ancestors and the new ones. And this is about my grandfather. Tobacco. Summer is over, a kiss of chill in the southern air. We see the dim orange of my grandfather's cigarette as he makes his way down the darkening road. Hear his evening greetings and the coughing that follows them. Not enough breath left now to sing, so I sing for him in my head where only I can hear. Where will the wedding supper be? Way down yonder in a hollow tree. The old people used to say a pinch of dirt in the mouth can tell tobacco's story. What crops are ready for picking? What needs to be left to grow? What soil is rich enough for planting and the patches of land that need a year of rest? I do not know yet how sometimes the earth makes a promise it can never keep. Tobacco fields lay fallow, crops picked clean. My grandfather coughs again and the earth waits for what and who it will get in return. So is this from my novel, Read at the Phone, which was written many years after Brown Girl Dreaming. And it's told from multiple points of view. One of the things you learn in writing classes that's allowed, and that a narrative doesn't have to be linear to get to the heart of a story. So it's the story of two families who come together when the teenage children in the family get pregnant. And this is the grandfather whose young daughter has given birth to a baby that he's now holding on his lap. Even a man's gonna cry. You can't help it. The mind going everywhere, from the blessing of a new life coming and that thinking filling your throat to your own daughter's childhood snatched right out from under you. Thought I would have Iris as a little girl longer than I did, but sitting here with you asleep on my lap, I can't imagine life any other way. Every moment for all the generations was leading to you here on my lap, your head against your granddaddy's chest, already 4 years old, hair smelling like coconut oil, something beneath that though, little girl sweat, almost sour, but then just when I think that's what it is, it turns sweetness somehow. Makes me want to sit here forever breathing in your scalp. When did your arms get so long? Your feet so big? These footy pajamas with reindeer all over them remind me of the ones your mama used to wear. She used to fall asleep on my lap just like this, back at the other house. Oh, time, time, time. Where'd you go? Where'd you go? My legs hurt tonight. Another place too, deep in my back somewhere, there's a dull, aching pain. I try not to think about it. Old people used to always say, you're only as old as you feel. Here I am, closer to 50 than 40, but I feel older than that most days. Feel like the world is trying to pull me down back into it. Like God went ahead and said, I've changed my mind about you, po' boy. A bath with Epsom salts helps some evenings. Ginger tea keeps Sadie's good cooking in my belly. Sitting here holding you at the end of the day, well, I'm not gonna lie and say this isn't the best thing that ever happened to my life, because it is. Look at you laughing in your sleep. Got me wondering what you're dreaming about. What's making you laugh like this? Tell your granddaddy what's playing in your pretty brown head, my little melody. Name like a song, like you were born, and it was cause for the world to sing. You know how much your old granddaddy loves you when you sing him silly songs. Sadie says she's going to have to get some earplug if she has to hear one more verse of Elmo's World or that song about how to grow a garden. But me, I can listen to your voice forever. Can't hear you singing enough. Come a day when you'll hear Errol Garner playing Fly Me to the Moon on the piano, and your own sweet mouth won't know what to do with itself, baby girl. Lord, you got so much living ahead of you. I remember the first time I heard Etta James telling the world she'd rather be blind than have her man walk away from her, than see her man walk away from her. The way her voice melody, like something maybe you're right now dreaming about. Wish I could sing it, but that would just wake you up crying. Always wish I could sing. Wish I could move my fingers across the piano keys like Sir Garner. That man was a genius. And when he touched down on those keys and played Janine, I Dream of Lilac Time, man, step back. Ouch. Burn yourself just listening to it. Just listening. You haven't been on this earth long enough to understand, but one day you will. Trust your granddaddy on that. It's a pretty night. I think the winter's trying to leave us. No more snow, but it looks cold out there. Our boy Benjamin was born on a night like this, cold and clear and quiet. That was when we were still in Chicago with Sadie's people. Feels like a long time ago, but not so far in the past that I don't remember the way that Chicago cold slipped past your bones, I swear. That wind coming off the water, what? I don't miss Chicago, but I miss the time. I miss who me and your grandma were back then. Sadie with that belly and the two of us always so happy just to be near each other. The way a fire seemed to rise up every time our arms touched. The way she looked at me like we had all the hours in the world to spend just grinning at each other. Yeah, I truly miss the time gone by. But if we had stayed in that time, you wouldn't be asleep on my lap right now, still holding tight to that book about a rainbow fish. Wouldn't say this while I was reading it, and you were awake, but I don't know about that fish giving away all its pretty rainbow scales. Makes me think of your mama. Thought she was still ours. Thought she was still my little girl, but she wasn't. Thought one day she'd grow up and I'd walk her down the aisle and give her away. Truth is, though, she wasn't mine to give. She wasn't mine at all. But it felt like I'd been scaled alive when Sadie told me about you coming. Felt like someone had taken a knife to my skin and just lifted it up off me. Guess that's where the tears came from, knowing there's so much in this great big world that you don't have a single ounce of control over. Guess the sooner you learn that, the sooner you'll have one less heartbreak in your life. Oh Lord, some evenings I don't know where the old pains end and the new ones begin. Feels like the older you get, the more they run into one long, deep aching. The night I got home from work to find Sadie in bed curled around a pillow, I knew. Your grandmother was never one to get back into bed once she'd gotten up. Get up, make the bed, start the day, that's who she was. Even after we lost Benjamin, she still got out of bed every morning, moved slower with that new bend in her back and all. But still, she rose. I said, Sadie, you sick? Your mind takes you places. Standing in our darkened room with only the light from the hall coming in, I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe it wasn't what I knew, but something scarier than that, something fiercer. Your grandmother holding that pillow like she was trying to hold on to life itself shook me. But I knew, quiet as it's kept, the connection between me and Iris was something no one, not even me, understood. But I could look at your mama and know that she'd been with Aubrey in the same way I could touch her shoulder and feel the hurting or the scared or the rage inside of her. I knew Iris in a way that Sadie didn't, but still. Melody, I never hope you have to hear your daughter scream and cry to keep her baby. I hope you never have to stand in the home you thought you'd grow old in, knowing that the life you'd made with your wife and child was over. I hope you never have to rethink the actions of a God you'd always believed in. Me and Sadie didn't understand what we were supposed to do with this new burden. Then you were showing yourself, this round bump that used to mean Iris was about to have a growth spurt. I want to call her Melody, your mama said, after Grandma Melody, who almost died in Tulsa. And she said your name again, your mama did. And me and your grandma held hands and each said our silent thank you to the same God we had come close to cursing only moments before. Sorry, I skipped a little bit there. But that's it. That's Red at the Bone. That's Po Boy talking to his granddaughter. And one thing I just have to say is I'm so glad to be here. And it's so interesting that every journey we do take is a journey that leads us close to something in our narrative life. So I know that if I hadn't met you, Meg, if I hadn't been a part of Solstice, and I continue to be part of the Solstice family, I wouldn't have written the books I've written because I wouldn't have had the experience and the time and the conversations and all the stuff that led me to becoming the Jacqueline Woodson that was able to write this book. So I am eternally grateful and wishing you all so much joy and peace and love and good writing.
Thank you so much for that amazing reading and your ongoing support of the Solstice community. As Meg mentioned, Jacqueline has been part of Solstice since the early days and continues to be a presence with us. Just as many as our faculty and alums remain a big part of Solstice. Our programs offer students a lifetime of fellowship with peers, mentors, and alums who came before them. From second, third, and fourth readers to reviews, blurbs, and writing groups, the Solstice Network is expansive and brings people together in myriad ways, even north of the border in Canada. We know many other writers crave that same network, a community that provides a sense of belonging and understanding. With a donation of $5, $10, or even $50, you can join us or reaffirm your commitment to help those writers find that community in Solstice. But don't just take it from me. I now welcome Solstice graduate Hannah Woodcock to the virtual floor via a pre-recorded video to tell us how the Writers Helping Writers scholarships helped her be part of a community of writers.
Hi, my name is Hannah Woodcock, and I graduated from the Solstice program this last summer of 2022 in the fiction genre. I only continue to grow more and more grateful for the Solstice community. I not only learned to hone lots of different craft skills in fiction and poetry and even nonfiction, but I also grew connected to an incredibly vibrant community of writers, which I continue to stay in touch with. It's this community and their work that has changed me the most, and which I can never thank Solstice enough for. However, I wouldn't have been able to partake in this if I hadn't been blessed with the funds from Writers Helping Writers. So thank you again, Solstice, and I hope and pray they continue to grow.
Thank you so much, Hannah Woodcock, for your very warm, heartfelt remarks. Our next special guest is Dr. Alan Lightman. I can't tell you how delighted I am to say those words, as I have hoped to involve Alan with Solstice in one way or another for many years. Like a few million other people around the globe, I first encountered the writing of Alan Lightman in 1992 when I read the captivating Einstein's Dreams, a novel like no other I've ever read, and one that's been translated into 30 languages and dramatized on myriad stages around the world. This book is a reflection of the left brain. This book is a reflection of the fact that Alan Lightman is one of those rare human beings whose right and left brain seem to be equal forces of nature. He began his career as an astrophysicist and has taught at Cornell, Harvard, and MIT. He has done fundamental research on the astrophysics of black holes, astrophysical radiation processes, and stellar dynamics, and is an elected member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. A native of Memphis, Tennessee, he is the son of a movie theater owner and dance teacher and Braille typist. His right brain, left brain abilities manifested when he was still a boy, launching his own rockets while also winning the State National Council of Teachers of English Literary Award. That duality is present to this day. At MIT, Alan was the first person to receive faculty appointments in both science and the humanities. He is author of numerous books, both fiction and nonfiction, including The Transcendent Brain, Spirituality in the Age of Science, The Accidental Universe, The World You Thought You Knew, Mr. G, a novel about the creation, The Diagnosis, which was a finalist for the National Book Award in fiction, and his most recent Three Flames, which is set in Cambodia, where he has spent a great deal of time. He's also written 2 picture books, Isabel and the Invisible World, illustrated by Ramona Kolitsky, explores light waves through the eyes of a little girl. And Ada and the Galaxies, illustrated by Susanna Chapman, is a tribute to the Hubble telescope and the interconnectedness of the natural world. He has also published a collection of poems, which of course makes him near and dear to my heart. Alan's writing has appeared in The Atlantic, Granta, Harper's, Nautilus, The New Yorker, The New York Review of Books, and Salon, and many other publications. His essays concern the intersection of science, philosophy, and theology, and have twice been named by the New York Times as among the best essays of the year. As if that's not enough, in 2005, Alan founded Harpswell, a nonprofit organization devoted to empowering young women in Southeast Asia with education, training, and a supportive network, with the vision of nurturing a new generation of women leaders who create and inspire positive change. He's also host of the upcoming television series, Searching: Our Quest for Meaning in the Age of Science, which premieres on public television in January 2023. The series is based on his book, Searching for Stars on an Island in Maine, among his other writings. What a pleasure and honor it is to present Alan Lightman. Please give him a warm welcome. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Meg. And thank you for inviting me to be part of Solstice. I'm going to read a few pages from a novel about a Cambodian farming family. Jacqueline Woodson, just in some of her reading that we just heard, talked a little bit about the experience of people of color. Of course, Cambodians are also people of color. And I feel a little bit out of place being a white person writing about people of color, but I have made more than 30 trips to Cambodia and believe that I've gotten to know the people fairly well. So I'm going to read the first few pages of the first chapter of my book, which is called Three Flames. The first chapter is titled Rena, who is the matriarch of the family. It's a farming family. Rena had just finished putting a quarter kilo of pork and a half dozen rambutan into her burlap shopping bag, wondering if her husband would scold her for spending too much, when she saw the man who had murdered her father. At first, she wasn't sure. She hadn't seen the man for 33 years, since she was 12 years old, and he was now whitened and bent over and barely able to support his skinny body with a walking stick. But he had the same crooked mouth and angular cheeks that she remembered, the same mole above his left eye, and as she studied him from 3 stalls away, she became more and more certain. Many times over the years since the war, she had imagined what she would do if she ever saw him again. What she had wished most for was some catastrophe to permanently separate him from his family, as it happened to her family, for him to be stricken with cancer and die a slow, painful death. That evening, after her husband had finished eating his dinner, Rena said to him, "I think I saw 2 ping in the market this morning." The smell of the pork blended with the odor of mildew, always present during the rainy season when nothing could be kept dry. "Who?" said Pick, wiping his mouth. "The commander of the camp at Sopig Mongol," she said. She looked over at Pick through the dim yellow light and tried to read his expression. The one room of the house was lit only by a single bulb, which dangled from wires that ran along the tin roof, down a wall made of packed palm leaves, around the 2 storage bags of corn and rice, and finally to a car battery in the corner. "Why are you talking about that?" said Pick, annoyed. "And anyway, how do you know it was him? It's been so many years." "Do you remember when I saw Cousin Mala after 40 years? Said Rena. "You didn't believe me then either." Pick didn't bother replying. He was sharpening the blade of his plow, which he would need to finish preparing his fields for planting. Sharpening blades was their son Kamal's job, but Kamal was out as usual, drinking cheap wine in the rain with his friends. Pick stood and began putting his tools away. He was not much taller than his wife and almost as thin, with fleshy lips, perpetually bloodshot eyes, and a scar on his cheek where he'd been gored by a neighbor's ox. Now the rain was pinging like gunshots on the tin roof, causing the 2 oxen under the house to shuffle nervously. Rena could look down between the bamboo poles of the floor and see their shadowy forms fidgeting below. "What should I do?" said Rena. "What's there to do?" said Pick. "Why do you want to think about such a useless thing? It's a waste of time. And tomorrow, don't buy any rambutan." Pick was always especially unpleasant the day after he'd spent the night with Lakina. "I'm doing," said Rena. "I don't know yet what I'm doing." "What is silly Mei Wei going to do?" said Pick. "Something." Unsettled, Rena sat back down next to her daughter, Tida, her eldest daughter, who began brushing her mother's hair. At age 16, Tida had gone to Phnom Penh to work off a family debt. She'd been back home for a year now, eating regularly, but her wrists were still smaller than the thickness of a cucumber, and she sometimes began screaming in the middle of the night. Their middle daughter, Nita, Pick had married off at age 16 to a traveling rubber merchant who promptly deposited his new wife for safekeeping with his aunt on the far side of Battambang province. But at least Rina still had her youngest daughter, Surepul, her Mi'un, still in school at Rina's fierce insistence. She would give her life to protect Surepul. Rina looked over at her youngest daughter in the corner, reading one of her school books. Surepul, although only 14, had her own mind and wrote poetry. She was the fire in the family. Rina closed her eyes, hoping the long brushstrokes would calm her. Her jet black hair fell to the middle of her back. Despite her age, she was still an attractive woman with a slender body and a sympathetic mouth. But her skin had become worn with the heat and the life on the farm, and deep grooves spread out from the corners of her eyes. One could see the Chinese blood on her father's side, as her nose was more narrow and her skin lighter than pure Cambodian. "I've had enough of silly talk for the day," said Pick. "I'm getting old, and tomorrow is almost here." Without bothering to take off his sweaty shirt, he lay down on his sleeping mat. Almost immediately, Surepul and Tida disappeared behind the dangling sheet that partitioned off the tiny area where they undressed and slept. Once the house had grown silent, Rina began brooding again about Tuch Ping, and her hands started to shake. She would do something horrible to him. She walked to the corner of the room where the family said prayers for their ancestors. On a table were candles, bits of colored string, photographs of Pick's parents and grandparents, and of Rina's mother and two grandmothers. Rina possessed only a single picture of her father, which she kept safe in a small metal box. Now she lit a candle and took out the photograph, stained and curled around the edges. Here, her father was a young man, perhaps 25 years old, handsome and sweet. In her mind, she could see the moonless night he was killed. She could see the red glow of the hand-rolled cigarettes of the Khmer Rouge soldiers as they sat under a tree. She could hear their voices as they came to her father's bunkhouse and called out to him, along with two other men who had all tried to escape to find missing members of their families. "We're moving you to another camp," said Tuch Ping, a phrase whose meaning all understood. She could hear the commander's raspy and arrogant voice. She had seen him order the executions of people before, as easily as if he were swatting mosquitoes. The cadres carried shovels and ropes. Rina looked at the photograph and said a prayer for her father. Inexplicably, she began thinking of the time they'd gone together to Phnom Penh when she was a little girl and sat on the grass beside the great monument celebrating the departure of the French. Rina had never seen a city. Amid the noisy crush of buildings and people flying by on their cycles and motos, her father sat quietly humming a song to her. Somewhere in the distance, she heard Pick snoring. Rina put out a cupful of sticky rice, sweetened with palm sugar, on the sleeping mats of each of her children, as she had done for years, and lay down. After a night of tossing and turning, Rina rose before dawn, climbed barefoot down the rickety wooden ladder to the ground, and began preparing breakfast and lunch in the little shed that served as the kitchen, 10 meters from the house. Tida had gotten up even earlier to start the wood fire. Until harvest, their food was limited, but Rina could still season it with garlic and ginger. A little later, Rina roused Pick and Kamal, who ate their rice and bits of dried fish in the dark without speaking. Afterward, the men loaded up the ox cart with sacks of rice seed and tools, and left for the farm. When she and Tita had finished cleaning the dishes, Rena swept the floor and dusted the tables and the sleeping mats and the walls. It was 8 a.m., time for the market. She gathered up food scraps for the oxen and went down the ladder again to the ground. Passing the kitchen shed, she caught sight of the pork knife and put it in her shopping bag. The market was always a barrage of color and sound, offering 1,000 distractions. But this morning, Rena walked purposefully past the oranges and the red rambutan, past the lavender and magenta sap fabrics, the screaming half-naked children and the chickens darting down the muddy path between the stalls, until she spotted the man standing near the covered stall that sold mangoes. She approached him as closely as she dared and got a good look, much better than the day before. She even heard him speak, asking how much he owed for a half-dozen mangoes. Was it the voice she remembered? It was the tired voice of an old man. After a minute, he seemed to feel her eyes and returned her gaze. They stared at each other for a few uncomfortable moments. She gripped the handle of the knife in her bag. Then the man looked away and hobbled to the next stall. She wouldn't approach him now, not today. It was still early in the morning and already so hot that the sweat had soaked through Rena's shirt. She nodded to several people she knew and bowed to a procession of monks in saffron robes walking through the muddy ruts left by the ox carts. When she passed the house of her best friend, Makara, she waited a few moments at the wire fence, but Makara wasn't there. Although Rena had lived in this village for nearly 30 years, only in the last few had she felt that she might begin to belong. This was her husband's provincial home, not hers. Her birth village was in Persat. She hadn't returned there since that frightening morning a lifetime ago when the young soldiers appeared and dragged everyone off to the camps. Only 2 years after the Khmer Rouge regime ended, when Rena was 14, her mother had died from gangrene, later her sister. Without any parents, Rena was taken into the household of her uncle, who arranged for her to marry Pick. She knew nothing of Pick or his village. At first, she had thoughts about going to school, but Pick put her to work on the family farm, and then the children began. After the birth of Tita, when Rena had been ill with pneumonia, Pick sat by her side day and night, putting wet rags on her cheeks and massaging her back. He did the same when she was sick with dengue fever. Over the years, she and Pick had grown accustomed to living with each other. Slowly, she'd made friends in the village, at the funerals and the weddings. It was Makara who first discovered that Rena's husband was sleeping with Lucky Na. Half the married men in the village had girlfriends, but few of them lived nearby. "I'm so sorry, dear sister," she told Rena and hugged her. When Rena confronted Pick about the affair, he said only, "It's none of your business." Since then, a year ago, Pick had been spending one night a week with Lucky Na. Every month, Lucky Na sent little gifts to Rena's children, pieces of fruit and bits of colored fabric, delivered by a toothless former monk. Rena would always throw the gifts into the river. Pick called Lucky Na his Bo Prum Yong, his second wife, but Rena and her friends called her a Srei Sam Fung, a slut. That night, after the second time she had seen Tush Ping in the market, Rena could hardly close her eyes. It was hot without any breezes, and she was thinking about the man. She saw him covered with blood, swaggering about their village. Then she was a child back in the camp, eating grasshoppers and crickets and anything she could find, digging canals in the mud with her fingers, hungry, always hungry. The following morning, the whitened old man with the crooked mouth was not at the market, nor the morning after that. A week later, Rena spotted him again, standing in front of some children playing in the mud near several crates of oranges. This time, she walked straight up to him. "Are you Tush Ping?" she asked. He seemed to lean more heavily on his stick. "Do you know who I am?" said Rena, her voice not as confident as before. He shook his head no. He smelled of tobacco. "Were you at So Peg Mongol during the Pol Pot time?" whispered Rena. The man said nothing, but she could see something cross his face. Slowly, he turned on his cane and putting his stoop back toward her. On her way home, Rena stopped at Makara's house. Today, Makara was home. "The man who killed my father," said Rena. "He's alive, and I saw him here in the village." Makara stopped feeding her chickens and looked up. Over the years, she'd lost a couple of teeth and gained weight, but she still had her broad and welcome face. "When?" 10 days ago, said Rena. "Really? Why didn't you tell me? What are you going to do? The police won't do anything." "I know," said Rena. "I haven't decided what I'm going to do." "But you're going to do something," said Makara. "Those killers should be brought to justice. They should suffer. You owe it to your father." She put her arm around Rena. "Tell Sayon. He knows about these things. He'll tell you what you can do. Where's this man living? Can you show him to me?" "I don't." Rena found herself suddenly frightened. She needed time to think. "I'm not sure where he lives," she said. "Sister," said Makara, "this is your chance to have courage. If I could get those soldiers who murdered my uncle and sister." Makara gently patted Rena's back. "Just tell Sayan when you're ready." In the following weeks, Rena saw Tush Ping several more times at the market. They would stare at each other from a distance, then go about their business. She noticed that the old man was always alone, and as he limped from one stall to the next on his stick, he seemed half in the grave. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Alan, for that wonderful reading. And thank you again for sharing your time and your talents with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Sharing. That's one of the key aspects of the Solstice community. Not only do students, faculty, and alums share in the love of writing and writing craft, but also they share resources to help more writers earn their MFA degrees. In fact, each year, they make up the majority of contributions to the fundraiser. Solstice provides an indescribable experience for writers from all over. Many of us had to carve out time in our lives for writing and sharing in our obsession of the written word. During residencies and one-on-one mentorship with faculty, we found what our lives had been missing: fellowship with other people who understand. Your $5, $10, or even $100 donation helps more writers become of this network so that when they graduate and once more must face the blank page without the structure of an MFA program, they still have a community of support to push them toward their writing goals. And now I want to pass the virtual floor to our graduate, Faye Snyder, another longtime member of the Solstice community, who will tell us some of the reasons why she donates to the Writers Helping Writers Scholarship Fund each year.
Thank you, Q. It's wonderful to be here. I appreciate being asked. I'm a Solstice 2009 graduate. Gratefully, one of the first 10. After this coming January residency, we will have 175 graduates. Ever since the Writers Helping Writers fundraiser was conceived, I've donated. Like most of you, I value creativity, giving voice, and learning. Since graduation, I've attended 24 residencies, most in person and lately on Zoom, an average of 2 to 6 classes a semester in all genres. In the early years, I paid next to nothing. Now the classes are free to alumni. This is my time of year to pay it forward, to support writers with great potential. I intend to donate online later. Please join me and make a generous donation in our Solstice future. I hope to see you at the next residence. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Faye. And thank you for being such a fervent and recurring member of the Solstice community. So now this concludes our event for the afternoon. Many thanks to Jacqueline and Alan for reading, as well as Dean, Hannah, and Faye for sharing how the Writers Helping Writers scholarships help creative individuals discover their writing community. Also, thank you to Sam for managing our Zoom session and to Meg for her wonderful introductions. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Your donations of all sizes contribute to this worthy work. Have a safe rest of your day.